We've been living in our cute little house for almost 3 years. It's peaceful and cozy, but it's most definitely haunted. It started with noises coming from a spare bedroom that is used for a tattoo studio. Things would fall. We would hear crashing sounds or things sliding across the floor. When you'd go into the room, everything would look normal. We'd hear the occasional footstep on the stairs. Well, I'm home alone a lot. My fiancé works different hours and has a social life, and I like to stay in. I began hearing him calling to me when he wasn't home. It started off with me being downstairs. I would hear him call out to me, "Babe? Hey." I thought he came in through the side door and I didn't hear him, so I would answer. After I got no reply, I would go look for him, only to find he wasn't home. At first I thought I was crazy, but I realized my dogs would lift their heads up and look as if they heard it too. It began to worry me when I would be asleep and be woken up by my fiancé speaking to me, but he wasn't there. It began to become an everyday occurrence, and I was starting to question my sanity. My mother and I went onto a trip to Maine, and while on the trip I was sleeping. I was shaken awake by my fiancé asking what time it was. I, half asleep, grabbed my phone, looked at the time, and answered him, only to remember I was on vacation 2 states away from him. After that happened, I decided whatever it was had to go. I'm a bit witchy, you could say, so I began burning sage and asking kindly to be left alone, offering to allow whatever it was to stay if it would please stop bothering me. Eventually, I decided to take another route, and one day I yelled as loud as I could, "Enough is enough, get out of my house." All of a sudden, the house got really quiet, and then it sounded like the house took a huge breath of air and let it out, almost like a sigh of relief. I've never heard it again since that day. I'm a medium, but last week, it's happened to be the most shocking encounter. I was eating my dinner, and with the corner of my eyes, I saw a little girl close to the stairs. I tried to ignore it, then I saw her again for 3 more times. And when I say to her, "Tell me, how can I help you?" She was blonde, beautiful, with a pink dress, and she told me, "I'm searching for my mom, I'm lost." And I asked her name, and she said her name, and she said it was the year 1982. And she was from my same little city in Italy. Then I needed to do something, so I called my archangels, and shiny stairs appeared in the room. The girl smiled at me, she went to the shiny stairs and disappeared. Then I checked on Google her name, and she was the disappearance from 1982. Still today I got chills. I always talk to ghosts, but this felt different. This poor girl, but now I'm sure she is in a better place. English is not my first language, so please bear with me. I, 26 female, used to stay at a friend's house, 35 female, Alabang. Here in Philippines, since I am currently working on a different city from my place. The first time I stayed there, I'm always having headaches and it feels like the energy in the house is heavy. I don't mind it at first, but things got worse than I expected. I never experienced any of this from any other place. It all started there. I always sleep on the bed with my friend. Then it always feels like someone is watching me. I always shrugged off that feeling at first but then I kept seeing a woman with a long hair and white dress watching me sleep. I always wake up at 3 a.m. and it scares the shit out of me. I ignored it at first, but one time I woke up and she was beside the bed, standing, and when I checked her face, her head is crooked, and she's looking at me. I immediately shook my friend awake, and the woman disappeared. I keep on seeing her. Even had a nightmare about it, so eventually I just got used to it. I asked my friend since I keep on getting headaches whenever I walk the hall beside the stairs, and that's when she told me the story of the house. The last owner of the house hung herself in the 2nd floor, and I got chills after hearing that story. I even told her to get rid of the doll facing the stairs that leads to that room. Since I got used to her, I just always try to ignore her when she's there. One night I was preparing my coffee at 3 a.m. and if I don't walk the hallway beside the stairs, go to the kitchen, I had to go around through the dining area with a big mirror in it. Like the mirror that you have at a dance studio. I'm done with my coffee, so I decided to go back to our room. When I was walking back to our room, I was looking outside and I saw a black figure beside the pool with yellow glowing eyes. We were staring at each other for like 15 seconds because I want to make sure I was really seeing what was there, and I was just frozen. I walked and acted normally when I went back to the room. I decided to wake up my friend and I was shaking. This was before I experienced a different encounter at my ex-boyfriend's house. So yeah, that's when it all started. So whenever I'm in a different house or a different place, I always choose to go home instead of staying in an unfamiliar place. I really don't believe in the supernatural, but when I tell you, when this happened, my heart dropped. When I still lived in the Philippines, my sister and I shared a room on the second floor. At the time, my aunt went out to run errands, so it was just me and my sister at home. We shared a room, and we were just hanging out in there with the door closed. While we were talking, there was a sudden frantic knocking on our room door. You know how you become familiar with the way your family members knock? This knock didn't sound familiar at all. The knocks were quick. As much as I wanted to think that my aunt was already back, something made me think otherwise. My sister and I looked at each other because she knew deep inside something felt off as well. She slowly walked towards the door to open it. And behold, no one was fucking there. It happened twice. Literally, no one was fucking home. To this day, I still have no explanation for what happened. Hi there, everyone. I am here to share my true story of an encounter with a supernatural power many know as a shadow person thing. Just some background info on my situation, which occurred when I was around 10 years old. So, the house I lived in with my mom, dad occasionally, and my 5 siblings. We all experienced one thing or another. So when this event I'm going to be describing happened to me, was in my brother's room, which he was 13, and we were chilling around. He was laying down on the floor by his head, and I was playing with a yoga ball maybe 10 steps away from him. We had been talking, but he had stopped, and I just thought he was tired. I played for 5 minutes, then looked over at him and I froze. Above him floating was some sort of black mass, and he looked as if he was choking. His eyes were bulging out of his head and face was turning red in color. I yelled to my mom to come up and I was crying. Came in to the room running as soon as she saw him. She ran and got her Bible and started reciting something from it, which must have worked, as the blank mass soon subsided to nothingness, but not before us hearing my brother let out a demonic deep scream. He then laid there with his eyes closed for a while. He then sprung up, panting, trying to get his breath back. We left the house the same day and stayed with family, but it seemed as if we could still see the dark shadow. We couldn't tell if it had followed us or if it was a trauma, but to be safe, we went to the priest to get the house blessed, and we had an exorcist performed on my brother. His eyes rolled back into his head and he started talking in a voice that wasn't his, and we couldn't tell what he was saying. He seemed good after that was done, though. He returned back to himself, and our house now has such a light atmosphere, and it feels nice and cozy. I'm not sure what it was that we all were getting targeted by, but it was for sure evil. Thanks for reading. All events told are a true story, and the reason I believe in the paranormal. Hi there. I grew up in what would be considered a haunted house in Vermont. This was back in the early 2000s. However, the house itself wasn't old, being built in the 70s by a local professor, though the land itself was older. For example, old stone walls on the perimeter, a foundation out in the woods from the 1800s or so. Things that started off small, random, occasional noises, feeling of being watched when in the basement. However, things escalated. A couple of the bedrooms in our home had walk-in closets. The doors would rattle violently. Often, if our family was upstairs, you could hear things crash on the floor below. The creepiest things I remember, however, was one evening. My dad and I were home alone after supper. All of the lights, electronics were turned off in the house, except for the dining room. From my dad's office space, however, I start hearing the best way I could describe. It was low, gloomy funeral music. I tried looking around for a source of the noise and couldn't find one. However, my father remained unfazed. It's been over a decade since I've been there last. After my father passed away, my other parents sold the property. However, to a certain extent, some of this has followed over the years. Weird sort of things. Pots and pans rattling at night, windows and doors opening and closing. At one point, the sound of a pig snort and the smell of sulfur. I managed to even get a photograph at one point of a face with blind eyes when I was a teenager. I try and remain skeptical. I'd much rather blame these occurrences on an overactive imagination rather than the paranormal.
I live inside my own world of make-believe. Kids screaming in the cradles, profanities. I see the world through ice covered in ink and bleach. Cross